Hello and welcome to Pussycat Cast 18. I'm here with the Doge in charge temporarily, Brian Martinez, and then also the adorable Spectre of Death, Prim Reaper, the Woozle Slayer, Karen Strawn, and our favorite professor, Aidan Paladin, to beat down the myths and mythsters of the marriage mandate. But before we start, I've got a couple of quick notes. First, this is not disapproval of anyone's autonomous choices. We're not opposed to either marriage or MGTOW, just a society that seems to entitle everyone to make men's choices for them, except men themselves. The other thing is, if you want to join the chat, please go to the Badger Live Streams channel. And if you don't want to wake up one morning and find yourself unable to find our content because YouTube finally dropped the axe on our channels, go to badgerfeed.com. We're going to be moving to a digest format for podcasting. So if you're listening to this in audio format and still want to follow our uncut live streams, you will also be able to find those at badgerfeed.com. Just go to badgerfeed.com. Do it! And on that note, let's march right down the aisle of holier than thou testimony, shall we? The marriage mandate. Men not marrying has become an issue for some, with women's magazine writers lamenting the disappearance of good men, academics asking why men aren't marrying, my screen disappearing on me for no apparent reason. There we go. And in the UK, Tory Member of Parliament Ian Duncan Smith, hopefully I just pronounced his name right and it's not Ian, but if it is, sorry, I'm from Ohio, we mispronounce everything, insisting that unmarried men often grow into dysfunctional human beings and become a problem for society. He went on to promote marriage as the preventative measure against drug and alcohol abuse and other criminal behavior among men, as well as unwed fatherhood. Throughout the article, he is clearly able to say what stakes he thinks society has in seeing men married, but isn't so articulate on what's in it for men. Mark Regnerus of the Wall Street Journal seems to concur. He has discovered a downward trend in the marriage rate in which he seems to find very disturbing. He has written a book about it and an article to promote that book, blaming cheap sex and condemning men for what second-wave feminists fought for years to stop society from condemning women for doing: having sex without any obligation. To facilitate his condemnation of male sexual freedom, Regnerus focused on the most shameful example he could find, which wasn't much. A man who repeated some pickup artistry rhetoric that is strangely reminiscent of the kind of advice women give to each other about men. If you know what girls want, then you know you should not give them that until the proper time. If you do that strategically, then you can really have anything you want, whether it's a relationship, sex, or whatever. You have the control. Sound familiar? Maybe a bit like, why buy the cow if you can get the milk for free? Why is it acceptable advice for women but shameful for men? Quotes from Regnerus's book, included in a New York Post article by Larry Getlin, paint relationships as a zero-sum game in which one side must be subjugated to the other, claiming that since men are no longer forced to settle in order to have access to sex, women are now forced to settle, entering into a doomed or otherwise unsatisfying marriage because men are in the driver's seat in the marriage market, and are optimally positioned to navigate it in a way that privileges their sexual interests and preferences. One of his points of reference for this conclusion: the book 50 Shades of Grey, which he clearly misunderstands as social commentary rather than a female sexual fantasy. The Wall Street Journal article is a cheap jab at men's sexual freedom. But don't take my word for it. Let me read you some passages from the article itself. Comment or ask some questions after each. Probably ask some questions after each anyway. Then give the panel a chance to respond before moving on to the next. With that in mind, let's dive right in. So, the first passage here, following the quote about what girls want, he says, Kevin, not his real name. Obviously, he's writing about Karen's dog. It's clearly a ruse.
Absolutely.
It's Karen's dog. Karen's
Absolutely.
dog has to get married. Kevin, not his real name, was one of 100 men and women from a cross section of American communities that my team and I interviewed 5 years ago as we sought to understand how adults in their 20s and early 30s think about their relationships. He sounds like a jerk, but it's hard to convince him that his strategy won't work because it has for him and countless other men. There you have it. Men who practice what women preach are jerks. And one guy's story can be generalized to male society at large. And notice, guys, he only talked about that guy. He didn't say anything about the women that he interviewed that maybe weren't ready to get married young, that were putting off marriage for careers or anything in this article. Nope, it's all about men and men having this freedom being a bad thing. So, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I this is Mark Regnaris.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I find him to be fairly sensible, but he's just like any other sensible guy in academia. He's extremely gynocentric, and he looks at things in terms of how is this going to affect women? And so essentially, uh, he's looking at, and I watched him in a panel discussion years ago on men not getting married and all of this stuff, and he seemed quite sensible in assessing what the problem is. And the problem is that men are in a seller's market, or in a buyer's market, right? Well, I mean, I guess men who want to buy sex are in a seller's market. Men who want to sell commitment are in a seller's market. So, and this has to do with, in particular, the disparity in educational attainment. If 60% of the people in university are women and they want to date, and they have a they're outnumbering men 3 to 2, then they're going to have to make some compromises in terms of being able to get access to men who are at their level. That's all about women and women's expectations, right? Nobody's stopping a woman in college from dating a fucking plumber, but they don't want a fucking plumber. They don't want Mr. Rooter. They want a man who's as educated as they are, who has the kind of future that they have. Dog, I will fucking kill you.
Oh, you're not gonna make
Um,
the dog get married? Ah.
no, no, I'm not. But I might actually strangle her at some point because she's just sitting here squeaking. Um,
All right, I
it's
gotta
not
ask the chat a
cute.
question. Does the chat hear and see, or rather hear us? Because uh, I think OBS is lying to me right now. It appears to have frozen, and I can't tell if it actually did or not.
Hmm.
Hello?
Hello,
Can you
can you hear me?
Yeah, so I'm listening to the stream, so there's a little bit of lag because I'm
Okay.
hearing something that happened later. But I could hear you and Karen just fine
All right,
when you
that's good because it just like It appears to have died, and I'm looking at the chat, and like I'm moving the chat, and it's not moving on my screen, and it's not telling me any input on my sound. I just
Yeah.
love OBS.
Oh my god.
Well,
It's moving over here just fine.
okay. Since it's
Here,
playing, I'm
carry
gonna
on.
read Moonblade's $5 super chat. He says, "Marriage is a lie. Trust the fungus."
Okay, what fungus are we supposed to be trusting?
That one I actually don't know that reference. If it's from a, I don't know if it's from a movie or a game. And I
Or
feel
is
like
it
I
more?
should, no, I really feel like I should know this reference because it sounds familiar. What is it to? And you guys will have to tell me in the chat because I have completely brain farted on that one. You could probably smell it.
I got it. I know the reference. It's from the Mario Brothers movie.
Oh my god, that's why
Yeah.
I
So
couldn't
I'm gonna leave
place
now.
it. Oh, thank you. Those pulling my butt out of the fire. Um, I saw that movie too. That's terrible. Okay. So, do either of our other two panelists have any thoughts on the idea of pickup artists are just jerks because they're doing what women are not allowed to be criticized anymore for doing? Or shall we move on to the next bit?
I can hear you.
Okay,
Oh,
who can I not? Oh, there, Aiden, are you talking?
Oh,
oh,
it's
I think Prim
Prim.
had something to say. I have a
Was
short thing, but yeah.
Okay, Prim, you're coming through really quiet on my end.
you're coming through fine on my end, so.
Well, yeah, but my end is the end that goes into the stream, so if I can't hear her,
Oh, God damn it.
what the hell?
Doge!
And no, he can't fix this.
Women
This is
in tech, am I
yeah,
right?
he's
Yeah,
not.
women in tech. So okay, yes, Prim, you're fine. If anybody can't be heard, try leaving and coming back in. You guys try as individuals first. Hannah, can
All
you
right,
hear
Prim,
Prim?
talk now.
Okay, yep.
I can
yep,
hear you
let's
now.
see how this works.
This will be fun if I have to keep leaving and coming back.
No, not really.
All right, speak up.
Okay, so hopefully that now that we can hear me, I was just going to say like it's just indicative of a lot of things. Women are allowed to do basically anything they want without question, but if men do these exact same things, then they are cads or jerks or chauvinists or whatever else you want to call them, and clearly they're going to lead to the downfall of the nation, even though women can do the exact same thing without apparently having any problems. Don't know how that works, but I guess it sucks to be you guys.
Yeah, that's the thing that struck me first about this, and it bugs the crap out of me because this is something feminists use the term slut shaming, and they blame
Yeah.
men for slut shaming, and they say this over and over and over again that women have all these problems sexually, that including in some ways including the issue of false rape allegations. That they blame slut shaming for false rape allegations. That if people wouldn't slut shame women, they wouldn't lie and say that it was rape when they actually were having consensual sex with somebody they are embarrassed to admit that they had consensual sex with, which is bullshit because it basically is an admission that women will throw somebody else under the bus to cover their own asses. So that doesn't actually make it better, but apparently feminists think it does. But in any case, yeah, it just it bugs the crap out of me to see them say stuff like that, and then when it's guys who are dealing with sexual freedom, when it's men's sexual freedom at stake, all of a sudden, slut shaming is just fine. And we don't necessarily call them sluts. We call them cads. We call them
dogs. It's
yeah,
dog
dogs.
shaming.
Yeah,
Oh,
but
there we go.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we also have another super chat. Uh, go. Jennifer Bouders, I think it's Bouders, gave us, I believe that's euros, 10 euros, and says, "Thank you for everything you do. Karen, where can I send you? Oh, it's Finland. Where can I send you booze from Finland?"
You can send it to me. Just hit me up in an email. I will send you my address. Send me crates and crates and crates of Finnish booze. I will happily sign for that when the mailman delivers it.
Sweet deal.
And I believe Aiden still hasn't gotten to have her say on this.
Oh, I think actually Prim covered what I said, which is essentially the idea of this extreme double standard that is repugnant to me. That somehow it's wrong for men to be to have this pickup artist sort of attitude, but it's fine for women to do the same sort of what I would call shit, uh, yeah, to do the same kind of like a sexual coercion and manipulation. That's fine. That's very bizarre to me.
Well, I think people are laboring under the misconception that women only engage in casual sex in the hope that they get some kind of commitment out of it. And that's not the case. It is the case with
No,
many women,
exactly.
but it's not the case with all women who do that. But what I think is the problem is that, I mean, society does seem to be somewhat prepared to sort of hold women a little bit accountable once they have actually had children, right? Once they have actually
Yeah.
had children, you get society guilting them for not being good mothers and things like that. But nobody wants to guilt or shame women for being irresponsible with their sexuality, because and you these are such old tropes. You go all the way back 500, 1,000 years, right? And essentially, the Latin word for rape was not rape. The Latin word for rape meant taking something that doesn't belong to you, right? The word for that we think of as rape, right, was something else, sputrum or something like that, which meant the forcible taking of a woman's virtue sexually. Um, and it was a completely different idea. But anytime you see rape throughout history, right, sort of in the Latin, the word rape meant that some guy seduced some woman. I mean, it might have meant sputrum or whatever it was called, right? But in most cases, it was just some guy who seduced some unmarried virginal woman and made her unsuitable for marriage. And so anytime feminists tell you that, oh, in history, women were forced to marry their rapists, well, most of those cases were consensual sex. And it was essentially a man who was taking something that he had no right to take.
And then
Right.
he
And it
was
was,
forced to take responsibility for the woman because somebody
yeah,
had to, and nobody else was
yes.
going to at that point.
Yes. In fact, in the Bible, it says, that a man who rapes a woman, right, needs to pay her father 30 freaking pieces of silver or whatever the hell it was, right? Compensation, and has to marry her, and he can never divorce her, right? So literally the only person who's forced by law to do anything in these situations of, this is the typical shotgun wedding situation where the man is run to the altar at the end of a shotgun and forced to take responsibility for the fact that he deflowered this woman, right? This is what rape was historically. This is how it was defined historically. And yet we have completely we have done nothing at all to remove or equalize the responsibility for responsible sexual behavior between men and women. since then. It's still all on the man, whether he's a rapist, right? Whether he, I don't know, took advantage of a woman while they were both drunk, I guess, right? They're both drunk. He's the rapist, she's the victim. Whether it's him not wanting to give her a commitment in return for the sex that he convinced her to have with him, right? He's not taking responsibility for the fact that he got his dick wet. He is not owning responsibility for a woman who allowed him into her vagina. That's all it is, right? And it really goes to show this whole thing where you have that a woman, right? A woman is the whole mythos of the soiled woman, right? Well, who was she soiled by, right? That assumes that in a virginal state she was pure, and it was coming into contact with a man's sexuality that soiled her. So whose sexuality do we see as dirty? Whose sexuality do we see as dangerous? Whose sexuality do we see as problematic? Always, 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 always the man's.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
and the more women are allowed to, just by, via technology, right? Or that they feel that they can, because they really can't. I mean, since the advent of the pill and abortion, out of wedlock births have gone way, way, way up, and single mother households have gone way, way, way up, because those things rely on people using them properly, and women don't always do that. But ever since women have felt that they have sexual freedom without the possible consequences of pregnancy, they have been free to, and the worst that they get is being shamed as sluts by other women. Like,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
the whole thing was fucked.
I've got a couple of super chats. French Honey Badger sent $10 and says he remembers this passage from Bellamy by a name I'm probably about to butcher because I almost flunked French class. I believe that's Maupassant. Hopefully I said that right. If not, my apologies. Where the narrator arranges with a young woman to kidnap her to force her parents to accept her marriage to him. I have not seen that, but I have seen that in other films, so it makes sense.
I assume it would be typical, of, and I have heard of cases where, because dishonoring a woman didn't necessarily even have to involve sex, right? A woman would be tainted if she was even maybe alone in a room, unchaperoned with a man, right? And so I'm sure that there were women who would arrange for that to happen so that the man that they wanted would be coerced into by social custom into marrying her, to do right by her, make things right. And I'm sure that there were parents who managed to orchestrate similar things in order to coerce a man of much higher station than they would otherwise be able to secure for their daughter, into to coerce him into marrying her in order to save his good name, because he has dishonored this woman, and if you do not do right by my daughter, right, your reputation as a gentleman will suffer, right? So I mean, I'm sure that there are all kinds of ways, just, even just looking at the ways women found to exploit the laws of coverture in order to gain the upper hand in divorces and things like that through history. Absolutely. Like, most people have no fucking clue the amount of power women had to coerce men to do what they wanted. And you look at what's going on in India right now. Half of all of the rape accusations that come across investigators' desks are stemming from consensual sex, where the woman, unmarried people, the woman wants him to marry her, right? Either because she became pregnant, or because her neighbors are starting to call her a slut, or looking down on her, or whatever, or whispering, or her parents are outraged that she's no longer a virgin. and his parents won't give permission. And the way to actually make the marriage happen is to lodge a complaint of rape. And the majority of those cases are resolved in front of a judge by the marriage of the rape victim and the rapist. And how much do you want to bet in 10 years in India, Indian feminists will be saying, look, only 10 years ago in India, women were forced to marry their rapist. When the only person in this who's been forced to do anything, as in not kind of sort of forced, or my parents really want it forced, but go to jail if you don't forced, the only person who's been forced into anything is the man.
Yep, this is true.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is something that actually, if you look at rape statistics now in India, there is a 65 to 85% false accusation rate. And about 20 to 25% of that is situations where either two young people eloped and the parents disapprove and they have made a rape accusation, or a rape accusation is being used to prevent the parents from saying that they can't get married, or a breach of promise to marry has occurred and the young woman is making a rape accusation because the guy didn't marry her after he had sex with her. But I want to read another super chat before I lose it. This is from Samurai Squirrel, who gave us $10 and said, "Hey Aiden, can you do a video spelling out what women find attractive in men? I'm autistic and want it spelled out. Should I lift weights or not? And are six-packs worth the trouble?" And I'm not going to make a beer joke here because that would be too perfect.
I couldn't necessarily do a video on that. Well, I could do some biological genetic stuff, but it is different for everybody a little bit. However, what I would say on that instance of what we were just talking about is that this is a basic process of hypergamy, essentially, in that women are, of course, as we are genetically designed to do, want to seek out the higher value, more successful male. This is natural and normal in human society. Um, the problem is that women are allowed to get away with this. And it's the only sort of societal function that is allowed like that, whereas men are beholden to society to have to capitulate to it. That, as Karen was saying, like a lot of this shit that happens in India, it may very well have been consensual. But what really is going on there is a very old practice, essentially, of this marrying up of the woman. Of she's been defiled, and then we need to marry her up into a man that's more successful. So it is horrifying, though, at least to me, that all of the ills of this are only placed upon the man, not upon the woman. Like she is, and really, I mean, it's how this goes both ways. That it not only infantilizes women, but it dehumanizes men.
Oh, yeah.
To the super chat guy, I just want to say, wild and woolly beards really get me off.
There you go.
But I may not be every woman out there, so.
But don't you know the lyrics to the song? I'm every woman. What is it? I don't remember the lyrics either. No, I want to point out actually a website here to look at, or rather a Blogspot blog. And this is one that I've referred to a few times, if I can, well, for crying out loud. It decided to, there we go, combine two URLs instead of giving me the one that I wanted. The Unknown History of Misandry is the name of this blog, and it's got quite a lot of information. But the thing that actually I wanted you to look at is ironically referred to as the Badger game. And if I remember right, this is
the Badger game.
Yeah.
The Badger game is when a woman seduces a man, right, and convinces him to come back to a hotel room with her, and then her accomplice, right at the moment of almost the moment where they're about to have sex, bursts into the room pretending to be her father or brother and demands a cash payment from the man for this violation of his sister or daughter, um, in return for not blasting it publicly that,
Right.
this guy was caught with his pants down with a woman.
And
So
this was not like minor stuff, okay? If you look at this, okay, this is 1910 is when this particular individual did this. This was that had a nickname for the behavior because it was that well known. And here we go. Both James Knott and his wife, was formerly Florence Bennett, are said by the police to have made disclosures this morning which throw new light on the perpetration of a highly original variation of the old Badger game. The most striking phase of Knott's story told today, Armstrong obtained $3,500 in 1910 by working a game in Milwaukee similar to that attempted in this city. So these guys, some of them made some seriously big bucks doing this. Um, so there was that. There's the Badger game, and then let's see if I can find
the heart
in this.
bomb
Yeah, the
racket.
heart bomb racket is also discussed here. This blog, you really should take a look at this blog. If
The
you're, did I go past it? No, I'm
the
still on the
heart the
F's.
heart bomb racket was based on laws that allowed women to be compensated to sue a former fiance for breach of promise and be
Yep.
compensated financially, because marriage was supposed to elevate a woman financially. And so if a man promised to marry her and then breached his promise, broke off the engagement, she was entitled to compensation for that. And what the heart bomb racket was women who actually played this as a con. So what they would do is they would court a man. They would, be on their best behavior, absolutely sweet, get him to fall in love with her, everything until he made a promise of marriage. After which they would let their true colors shine, and they would become absolute harridans, harpies, viragos, termagants, whatever you want to call them. And he would break off the engagement, at which point they would sue him. They would get their financial compensation, and then they would move on to the next guy and do it again and again
And
and again
again.
and again.
And
Right? So
here's a mention. The New York Times this wrote about this one, and this is from the Heart Balm Racket and Feminist Rhetoric in 1869. I don't believe this amount of money was actually from 1869. The New York Times of several days and other journals of the city contain articles on Amanda Craig's modest suit for damages for breach of promise, while the reports of women's rights meetings tell us much of the often repeated degradation of women. There is no doubt a great deal of degradation, and perhaps there is no greater self-degradation than these shameless, loathsome suits for damages for blighted affections. No law except the English and American law knows of such suits. A modern English judge had said that these suits are well founded. A girl who, under promise of marriage, loses other opportunities of a fair settlement is entitled to damage for loss of the time. Is this the vaunted chivalry, romance, civilization of our advanced age? The 12 men who awarded $100,000 to the lady with the loving name must have considered her affections worth a great deal, even after she had shown by suing Mr. Sprague of what dimensions they must be. It is high time that by law or state constitutions this legal coarseness and Anglican barbarity were totally abolished. So there were people trying to get rid of this as early as the late 19th century, mid to late 19th century. But this was something that was kind of a consistent thing throughout history in Western societies under English common law, that women sued if there was a breach of promise to marry. And this continued on into the 20th century. And there were alerts regarding the extortion scam So this wasn't something that just went away. They didn't get rid of it when they first started talking about getting rid of it. Um, but no, I thought I would simply mention that, bring it up simply because it is very much related to what we're talking about. But I'm going to go on a little bit more in the article, and mention a couple of other paragraphs. Uh, Regnerus specifically states his belief as to why men are not marrying here. And this probably isn't the entire thing that he's said, because he's been on talk shows and he's got an entire book, and this is just his article peddling his book, so this will be a condensed version. But what he said here is, my own research points to a more straightforward and primal explanation for the slowed pace toward marriage. For American men, sex has become rather cheap. As compared to the past, many women today expect little in return for sex, in terms of time, attention, commitment, or fidelity. Men, in turn, do not feel compelled to supply these goods as they once did. It is the new sexual norm for Americans, men and women alike of every age. Of course, men not marrying, right, couldn't have anything to do with the current environment of family court and
Oh
criminal
no,
court.
not
That
at
that would have
all.
nothing to do with it. Because what
Never,
man
never,
what
never.
what man wouldn't want the thrill of risking a decade of vexatious litigation at the hands of an ex-wife trying to wrangle a better custody and property division out of a court ruling, or maybe just avenge her savage ego, as her ex begins to recover from the breakup. Am I right, guys?
Well, okay, and he's also ignoring 80% of men here, right? Because for the top 20% of men, sex is cheap. For the bottom 80% of men, sex is so unattainable, right? That they might as well just watch porn, right? And that seems to be what's happening is we have this divide where sex among the top ranked men is super cheap because women all want men who are superior, men who are above them in the socioeconomic hierarchy, right? And so those are the men that women are having sex with, or the men, the pickup artists who can feign that or trick women's libidos into, kind of uh, into kind of seeing them that way, right? But the bottom, 60 to 80% of men are getting very, very little sex. It's not cheap for them. It's simply unattainable. It's not even expensive for them. It's just completely out of their price range. They are not in the market at all, right? So I think he's missing a vital part of the calculation here, and that is women's expectations as revealed by OkCupid's wonderful research into, men how men rate women on the website. That it's a perfect normal bell curve, but when women rate men on the website, they rate 80% of the men on that website as below average.
Well, I think that has to
I
do exactly with the. Oh, I'm so sorry. Um, I'll try to get mine out real quick. I think,
okay.
yeah, you're completely correct in that part of the problem is there is a difference between, yeah, absolutely, between men and women in terms of women do have this sort of higher position in the sexual market value that women, they have the ability to go out there and be like, I pick and choose my men. And it's also part of what feminism gets into, which is so incredibly absurd to me, because once women, quote, hit the wall, if you want to call it that, all of a sudden now we have to demonize men for seeking out high fertility women. But women are constantly given or expected to be given high value men, regardless of their fertility or their status in society. So, well, fuck.
Well, I love how they kind of also make the implication that, oh, men aren't expected to commit to these women anymore. They can just get sex and go off on their merry way, and they don't have to deign to marry this woman if they don't want to. But they conveniently forget to mention the fact that, how many times is it women ending marriages versus how many times is it men, right?
About
Like there's
70% of the time it's
yeah,
women.
exactly. So who's the one not committing here? I don't really think that it's men a lot of the time.
Well, I think women want a wedding. They want a wedding, but they don't necessarily want a marriage,
Yeah, they want to
right?
be a
And if
princess for a day.
honestly, if guys who are listening, if you want to know whether the woman that you're going to marry is the right woman, right? If she's prepared to have a wedding where she wears a dress that she already owns, and she invites 25 or fewer people, and then everybody just goes out to dinner at a restaurant, right? And the whole thing costs like $1,000 max, right? If she's willing to do that to make her commitment to you, then she's probably worth marrying. But if she wants
Yeah.
to have the big, huge $100,000 extravaganza, and the dress is that she's only ever going to wear once is going to be $12,000, um, and the very first thing she does when you propose to her is not post a selfie of you and her as her new profile photo on Facebook, but a picture of the ring.
Ooh,
Okay.
that's
You
some red
know,
flags. Yeah.
that's
That's
a
some big red
whole
flags.
that's a whole bunch of fucking bullshit.
I mean, unless you
Yeah.
both want to have the huge wedding and you can afford it and it's like totally within your budget, then you do you. But yeah, otherwise, definitely big red flags.
I can tell you
Well,
from personal experience that when a woman wants to have a sensible wedding, and doesn't want to buy a new dress and doesn't want to go all out and doesn't want to plan for a year and all that stuff. Because that was me. I had a dress I wanted to wear that I thought was a very pretty dress, and I was gonna just we had my husband's uncle is a minister, so that to me was family, accepting family, and that was the most important thing. And my friends and my family just lost their shit at me over it because I
What?
wasn't having a big showy wedding. I had we had a 3-year-old together, and they, oh, you're not gonna wear white. I'm like, I think everybody knows that I'm
that
not a virgin at this point,
oh my
because I
god.
I have a 3-year-old child that's going to be at the wedding, with my soon to be husband. Where everybody's going to know that means I'm not a virgin, okay? If they don't know how he got in, they know how he was supposed to get out, one way or another. There's no hiding
Aren't
that.
Well,
there?
But in
if
any
nothing
case,
if nothing went in,
it went,
something at
yeah,
least came out. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
but
aren't there
obviously something went.
studies
But
that
and it was.
aren't there studies that show a reverse correlation between the cost of a wedding and the likelihood of divorce?
Yeah, I suppose. I don't know. And see, I don't know how much the ex
Oh,
spent,
I don't even know
insisted
that
on
one.
spending, but I was really adamant about that. We should do what we could afford. I didn't, if unless he wanted to do something unusual or special, or had any input that he wanted differently, then let's keep this, because neither one of us likes big crowds of people. So and we caught all kinds of flack for it, just all kinds of flack. And it was like, whose wedding is this? We're the
I
ones
don't
getting
even
married, and it's not like, what do you want me to make him jump through hoops? We're together. We have a kid together. We're gonna stay together. That's it. Period. What's wrong with you people? But that was the way
I
everybody acted about it.
I
I've
just
got
I
two
just
super
find it
chats I want to read real quick before we
they
go
they
on.
want they want a wedding with an open bar. That's what
Yeah, I
your
know they
family
want.
was all
Well, you know
about.
what? I would have been more than happy to have a
Yeah.
big old backyard
Mm.
barbecue, with beer and any alcohol anybody else wanted to bring. That would have been fine with me, no problem. But no. So Corinne Strong sent us €5 and says, I wanted to add my 2 cents to the stream. €5 is worth more than 2 cents, with a hefty markup of 25,000%, she says. Thanks, HBR, you bunch of capitalist swine. Shakes cloaked fist. And then we have French Honey Badger said, my brother married his 6-year girlfriend That's a long engagement. In small committee, less than 30 people total, and they divorced within 6 months. Wow. Um, so
Oh,
there's going to be exceptions to
that's
every rule,
actually
but
no, but
people
that
who elope
that
too, that might actually have, like, you hear the bride and the groom went to Vegas and on a whim they got married with a
no,
judge. That's
it's
not what
act
we're talking about, but
no, no, no,
that's a long
and
engagement.
what it is, well, it's not a long engagement because they probably weren't engaged. They probably were dating, and then for financial reasons, they moved in together in order to pool resources. And then they, incrementally, increased their level of, and then they could, it was just like they couldn't. Oh, what do we do now? Right? Okay, we're having problems. What do we do now? How do we fix
Yeah.
them? Oh, let's get married.
Well, and
Right? And
they
I
may
know
have had people
Oh,
lots.
going,
that
"What? When are you
always
guys going to get
works.
married? When are you guys going to get married?" Because I've heard that one too, and especially the pressure is on with, like, the pressure will be on the guy. When are you going to ask her to marry you? When are you going to ask her to marry you? Guess who asked in my marriage?
Well, that would be you,
Well,
I'm
Yeah,
sure, because
so
taking a long shot.
that pushy cunt that. But and
you're
this
the
is
type, yeah.
well, yeah, and you know I thought, well, he had to ask in his last marriage, so I'm asking this time, right? That wasn't really why, but I mean,
I think that's
I wanted to
important.
make sure with the way my family was acting, I needed to make sure that he knew I was committed to things, and that was one way. That was one way to do it, was to ask him before he got a chance to say anything to me. But one of the things about this paragraph that I read that we've been talking about here, this really gives something away as far as I'm concerned. I don't know if he realizes that he basically just admitted that he sees marriage as a primarily economic arrangement, which is one of the reasons I think divorce is so rampant. A lot of people treat it as a primarily economic arrangement rather than a partnership that two people take on, where their whole life they are partners in everything. They are now, it's them against the world basically as
Well,
a
okay,
set.
okay. Let's look,
And in the
but
past it was
let's look at it.
always an economic arrangement, but there was, once you got married, each of you was invested in the other's welfare because that was your family, that was your resources, and that was how you lived. And my question now is, should it still be a primarily economic arrangement? I mean, with the introduction of romantic love in history, changing the way marriage has gone and changing what it has become. We get these, I don't know, grandiose notions about what it's going to be like, but it is a
Well,
partnership at this point,
oh,
and should it not
well,
be?
I think yes. Marriage being an economic arrangement would be perfectly fine if it was possible for a married couple to contract to sign a contract that spells out obligations, responsibilities, duties, entitlements, all of those things. And that would, but what marriage is, it was always assumed to be, those terms were always assumed to be there. And divorce was extremely hard to come by. I mean, up until the mid 19th century, you needed an act of parliament to divorce in England, right? So essentially what you had was two people who were engaged in an economic contract, and if either of them left without just cause, without real cause, they left with essentially, nothing, right? And if a man could leave without just cause, but he still had to pay for his wife, he still had to live up to the economic end of his contract, right? So if she left without cause, she left with nothing. If he left without cause, he paid her for the rest of her life alimony. That's how that all worked. And that essentially what you didn't have was an economic contract wherein one person can unilaterally, for any reason or no reason whatsoever, decide to leave and still benefit from the economic terms of that contract, right? And that is women right now. Women can decide for any reason or no reason to leave the marriage, walk away almost as well off as they were financially within the marriage at his expense, right? That is what this has turned into. And so if I think if you can look at it as an economic contract as long as you treat it as an economic contract, and the minor partner can't just freaking take their freaking 40% and pack up their toys and fuck off whenever they want. They can't do that, right? There
I
has to
think
be
a
some
large
kind of penalty.
Absolutely. I think a large portion of the problem is that there's seemingly a misunderstanding, or maybe not a misunderstanding, but a misperception. I don't know what it is, but primarily the purpose of marriage generally is for the production of children. And ultimately, what we find in terms of the research in terms of social psychology and pedagogy and child development is that a two-parent household is simply better for the development of the children. So when we talk about a lot of this, I find it very disconcerting that this all gets put onto the parents as, oh, I just want to do this or I want to do that. And particularly as women are given a seemingly limitless ability to divorce their partners and to take the children. Therefore, this is not good for the children. We know this. We know this sociologically and psychologically. This is not a healthy thing. So I really struggle to understand the argument for it, though. To say that women are allowed to divorce you and I am done with you and you're out of my life,
No fault
when
divorce is
it's
completely
insanity.
fucked up. Yeah. I find it like, because it was a 5-year decision for me to ask my husband for a divorce. And like it took 5 years from when I started thinking about it to when I actually did it. And a lot of that decision had to do with, how is this going to turn my kids' lives upside down? Right. And, is it really so bad? Is the relationship really so broken down? Right. That it's better for my kids, for me to leave than it is for me to stay. And I actually feel kind of vindicated in the sense that after we split up, my kids' grades in school went up, not down. Um, but it's just like I can't imagine being someone who is, like if it's just you and the guy, right? Okay, leave. Go ahead. Leave, take what you came in with, take whatever gains, your share of whatever gains you made as a couple, all of that, right? Go ahead and do it. But once there's kids involved, you would really think that women would be prepared to think about how this is going to impact their children, and whether, and the whole thing that mothers are so self-sacrificing. Mothers sacrifice for their children. Oh, they do, they do,
Oh,
they do. Yeah, well, not in this, apparently. Right?
No,
I
this
stayed for
is
5 fucking years to sacrifice for my children. Right? Most women don't do that. Most women are just like, Wendell, I'm not content. And then they're gone, and they take the kids with them, and they turn everybody's life upside down. And
because
they are the only
what
one
reason do
who
they
is
have to not do
arguably.
that?
and they demand a reward. On top of that,
Yeah.
I've got
They
a
have
couple of
everything to gain.
super chats, and I'm going to point something else out here. So first we have Jennifer Bowders, who sent us €5 and said, "My mother got very upset with me. I told her me and my boyfriend weren't marrying anytime soon because I had to get my residency first in Finland and get a job." See, that's a wise choice though. Getting your ducks in a row before you start your family makes things a lot safer for your family, and that's kind of the goal. It's what I I screwed up on probably the worst was not doing that. And yeah, a lot of families do get very I don't know, they act like you should get married young whether you're ready for it or not, and I think it's very unwise. We have $5 from Hoki Bukisa, who says, cash prizes! Well, yeah, that's basically what you get in a divorce if you're a woman. And then we also have $10 from Ziranx, who says, regarding Prim's remark, and this has been a while ago, I believe he was talking about the cheap wedding versus large wedding. He gave a link, which actually I think, Prim, you have that in the live show chat. So apparently, what Karen said is correct. Cheap weddings and large family is the way to go. And I suppose that does make sense. The more you have invested in your family emotionally, the harder it is to walk away. And women are emotional beings, unfortunately, because growing up, women are not as carefully taught to overcome their emotions with logic. So yeah, definitely, that would be a contributing factor if you have a large family and you don't make a big deal about the start of the wedding so much as you do about the commitment itself and what it stands for. That said, the love aspect of marriage, if you go to gynocentrism.com, the writing there is great. Oh, and we have Joey Jojo. The only thing my mom sacrificed for me was her liver, drinking away her past husbands. That one's sad, and that was a $5 super chat. I I don't even know what to say to that. Um, Other than I'm sorry. And geez, the super chats are coming fast now. I'm not going to be able to do anything else. Uh, Moises Salazar. What about the alt-right fascination with white women? I have no idea. But according to gynocentrism.com, it is clear that much of what we today call gynocentrism was invented in the Middle Ages with the cultural practices of romantic chivalry and courtly love. In 12th century Europe, feudalism served as the basis for a new model for love in which men were to play the role of vassal to women who played the role of an idealized lord. C.S. Lewis, back in the middle of the 20th century, referred to this historical revolution as the feudalization of love, and stated that it has left no corner to our ethics, our imagination, or our daily life untouched. Compared with this revolution, states Lewis, the Renaissance is a mere ripple on the surface of literature. Lewis further states, everyone has heard of courtly love and everyone knows it appeared quite suddenly at the end of the 11th century at Languedoc. The sentiment, of course, is love, but love of a highly specialized sort, whose characteristics may be enumerated as humility, courtesy, and the religion of love. The lover is always abject. Obedience to his lady's lightest wish, however whimsical, and silent acquiescence in her rebukes, however unjust, are the only virtues he dares to claim. Here is a service of love closely modeled on the service which a feudal vassal owes to his lord. The lover is the lady's man. He addresses her as midons, which etymologically represents not my lady, but my lord. The whole attitude has been rightly described as a feudalization of love. This solemn amatory ritual is felt to be a part and parcel of the courtly life. So this is basically what happened to marriage. This is where it went, and this is how it went that direction. Um, and to me, it seems that is sort of the beginning of the end of marriage. Not that you shouldn't love your partner, not that you shouldn't have great dedication to your partner. Both sexes should do that, not just one. And it would be a working commitment with both sexes doing a rational and reasonable level of that, not one being slave to the other, but both sexes being dedicated and invested in the relationship. And I think that making that the next evolution of marriage would be the only way to restore it,
Does
essentially, in today's
anybody
society. And in order to do that, one of the things that we have to do is get rid of the imbalance in family court, wherein uh, on the basis of feeling like the slave owner, the wife can take all of the ex-husband's property, can take custody of the children, and can enslave him with alimony and child support for the rest of, his kid's childhood and possibly his life. One more super chat. Reed Moonblade says, back then, knights would also attack random people because they were bored. Well, that fits in with some women's behavior today, I
Well,
will
there you
say.
go.
So,
I do want to say in response to the courtly love stuff.
yes.
Does anybody remember that scene in Fiddler on the Roof when um, uh, the guy and his wife Golda are lying in bed and he's saying, do you love me, Golda? Do you love me? And she says, haven't I lain next to you in this bed for the last 25 years? And he says, yes, but do you love me? And she says, haven't I cooked you food and put it in front of you for the last 25 years? And he says, yes, but do you love me?
Yeah, there's a
And
song comes out of that.
yeah, and she's just like, look at what I do for you. Look at all of these things that I do every single day that show my love. Why would you even wonder if I love you? And I think that is and I'm sure that he does things every single day out of love for her too. And it doesn't we have this, the romanticization of love and turning it into this kind of big production. I think what happens when that is what it is and where everything's a rom-com, right? Everything's just this big, huge, it's the Notebook, and all of these movies that Titanic and the whole bit. People start to expect that, and particularly women start to expect to feel those things forever. And you will never feel, the 500th time your loved one, your one true love walks in the door, the 500th time he walks in the door, you will not have the same butterflies in your stomach as you did the third time he walked in the door, right? It's just not going to happen. He's not going to be able to sweep you off your feet, 10 years in when you have two kids. It's not going to happen. And they've done studies on this, and they have stuck people in MRIs to watch their brain activity. These are people who have said that they have found their the one person that I love, that I will be with forever. They are absolutely positive about this. And when those people have said that 3 weeks or 3 months after they met that person, and they are shown a series of photographs going so fast that they can barely register them, and their one true love is in the mix, parts of their brain light up that are all to do with sexual attraction and excitement and dopamine and all of this other stuff, right? Okay. And almost like gambling addiction. It's an addiction center, right? And when it's 10 years down the road, the parts of their brains that light up are about empathy and compassion and being comfortable and all of those things. And I think that when people who are raised in the culture right now, with all of the sort of messages that we're getting right now, and they think, when the big, huge flame, goes down to a sizzle or a simmer or just coals, that there's something wrong. And no, there's not. There's nothing wrong. That's how everything goes. That's how every relationship goes. You
It's
you you never get that feeling, that initial, is it going to work or isn't it? Does he love me or doesn't he? You're never going to get those feelings back. Those are feelings of anxiety that mimic sexual excitement, right? It's
But it's that way with all of your other relationships too. I mean, you grow up with your family, and there is you have a different relationship as a child with the adults in your family than you do once you become an adult, and you still have, your parents are still your parents as long as they live, your grandparents are still your grandparents as long as they live, your siblings are still your siblings, and so on. um, but you have a different relationship because you have different degrees of accountability, you have different degrees of capability, and that changes everything. So as you get older, for instance, I went as a grandchild. I went through stages of being the cared for under the care of my grandparents, being, the buddy that goes over and hangs out, being one of the, like the well, with my grandfather, I was the favorite grandchild. And of course, my grandmother had a degree of dedication to me because partly I I had need of knowledge that she had. So I mean, grandmother was a nurse, so and with me being sick all the time, she paid more attention to me in some ways than she did the other grandkids. Although I would say my brother was probably a favorite with her, and and this is something that, as you grow up, you become more and more. You're still learning from your parents and your grandparents, and everything, but you have a more, almost like a, not a colleague relationship, but a co-adult relationship as adults. And then as they start aging, my grandparents moved in with my parents when I was a young adult, and I was a caregiver for my grandparents. And I have been a caregiver at times for my parents when they've gone through illnesses. So it was a role reversal. And the same love is there throughout your life, but it goes through stages as your life changes. And your love for your spouse is the same way, in that your relationship starts out new, your knowledge of each other is at one stage when your relationship is new, and as you develop and grow together, and you become sort of more synchronized in your understanding and knowledge of each other, it changes, not just how you express your love, but how it manifests. And that's all good. But that's my take on relationships. I'm going to read two more super chats. We have
Wait,
Blave
wait, wait,
Kaiser.
wait, wait, wait,
Actually,
wait, wait.
three. I'm going to read them,
Hannah,
and
Hannah,
then we'll go
no,
on
no.
to what you have to say,
I
Karen.
want Aiden. I want Aiden to speak.
Okay, well then we'll go on to what
She
Aiden
was
has
gonna.
to say, but I'm going to say this real quick. Hoki Bukisa sent me $5 and ordered me not to read his super chat, and since I am a disobedient cunt, don't read this. It adds nothing to the show. Why are you reading this? Then we have Blave Kaiser, who sent $5 and said no fault divorce should be go to the courthouse, sign some papers, and let the two hash everything out on their own. Courts should be minimum. And I will agree that courts should be minimum. If we minimize the court's influence, that would alter a lot of the incentive for divorce. Joey Jojo gives us $5 and says, I can't function with people, that's why I want robots. I am surprised others can do it. It all seems so alien to me. Joey Jojo, it sounds like you are hanging out with the wrong people. And go ahead, Aiden. Are you talking, Aiden? Because I cannot hear you.
I can hear her.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
I
we're going to do the we're gonna go silent for a second. I'm going to reload the
back out.
stupid. Yeah, I'm gonna back out and come back in again just as soon as I get a chance. Here we go. All right, Aiden, talk again.
Okay, we physically
Now I can hear you.
cannot maintain it. We cannot. The when okay, so it's the everyone knows at this point it's the hormone called oxytocin, right? It's the pleasure hormone. It's the bonding hormone. It's released in extensive amounts when women give birth. However, it takes about 5 seconds of physical skin-to-skin contact for oxytocin to start to be released by the hypothalamus. The problem is that that hormone is so incredibly strong that were we to continually feel the love that one feels when they fall in love, we would go insane. Our bodies would destroy themselves, right? We have to come to this sort of maintenance level, right, of physiological maintenance love, I think is the right way to say it, because of course, never your love for your husband or your wife is never going to be at the extreme level. It's going to be in the beginning, just for the same reason that maybe the love for your baby is not going to be the extreme level, although you will always love your child. It's not going to be on like this extreme evolutionary standpoint.
High alert.
Right,
I
high
would
alert,
call
high
it.
alert.
Yeah.
And because you can't function that way. If we functioned that way, if that's how humans worked, that love was constantly at 100%, we would die. We couldn't function that under those circumstances. That's all.
Well, even think about how, like, I remember when I was first dating my guy here, and I was completely obsessed with him and with, you know, uh, answering his texts, immediately, and all of this stuff. And I was distracted all the time. This is very, very much the way I was when, in the 6 weeks immediately following giving birth. Um, Super distracted, don't want to let him out of my sight, want to be together all the time, want to be skin to skin all the time, all of those things. You can't actually have a job and indulge that. At least maybe you can if your boss is understanding and knows that you're falling in love. Um, and then you'll get over it eventually. You'll get past it and begin to function again as an employee. But the whole idea that that we could exist in that state of falling in love forever, you're right. It would be impossible to do it, to physically sustain that.
You'd have a heart attack.
And yeah, you
Yeah,
would.
completely exhausting.
Yeah.
Well, and it really is, a lot of it is anxiety. I mean, like that butterflies in your stomach feeling. That's what you feel when you watch your kid walk off of like a wall, and drop 10 feet. That's the feeling that you get, is butterflies in your stomach. That's the feeling that you get when the man that you're falling in love with walks in the door, right? Or when he kisses you. It's all anxiety. It's anxiety, and it's, will it or won't it? Is it going to happen or isn't it? Does he love me or doesn't he? It's all that uncertainty. You can't exist in that uncertainty for very long before it starts to really fuck with you.
Now, to me,
So
that suggests also, well, we're talking about non-marriage and the fact that society pressures men to marry, and that social pressure being a bad thing because of the reasons behind the social pressure. I will say the oxytocin phenomenon, what happens with skin to skin contact and how it affects the brain, how it affects our attitudes towards each other, and in particular how it affects men, because men are more willing to become protective of the person that they've had skin to skin contact with, particularly after sex, and especially if a pregnancy occurs. To me, that spells the idea that hookup culture is bad news, particularly for guys. It's bad news in
it
terms of
is.
other things. There's obviously the risk of
I think it's bad
STDs.
for
There's the
everyone.
risk, yeah, and it's not shameful. It's a matter of like you're not immoral or evil or bad for wanting to have sex with people. It's a matter of you're selling yourself short and you're putting yourself through something that manipulates you psychologically in ways that you're not fully aware of, and you essentially make yourself vulnerable to your sex partner every time you do that in ways that you're not aware of. And
Oh, you know what men aren't aware of. Oh, shut up, dog. You know what men aren't aware of is the fact that women's emotional tears contain oxytocin. And when you administer oxytocin via a nasal spray, it makes people more susceptible to a sales pitch. They are more likely to buy what you are selling. And
And
when
when you
men are
smell
when
something, it's because
when
particles of it have gotten up your nose.
yeah, and when men are exposed to women's emotional tears, it results in a decrease in libido, a decrease in testosterone levels immediately, and an increase in feelings of protection and wanting to comfort.
No, so that's a situation where while not I'm not in line with what this guy's saying in his article and everything. That doesn't mean that I'm in line with the idea that seems to get tossed around by the pickup artist community of going around and sleeping with whoever you want when you want frequently every weekend a different girl. It's not healthy, and it's not it like if you, especially if you're not inclined to do that. Don't let anybody push that on you because it's not good for you anyway. And uh, doggone Naxos, am I a bad person that I laugh at women's tears? Not when they're ridiculous, and quite often, as a woman who gets very frustrated when frustration makes me cry, and I'm not sad and I'll end up crying anyway. Women's tears can be very ridiculous. I cry under ridiculous circumstances, and then I get very angry about it. Why the hell am I crying right now? This isn't even something to cry about. God damn it! And I'll walk away. I can't
cried.
have this discussion until I don't have snot on my upper lip anymore. So yeah.
I cried over an episode of Rick and Morty the other day.
Oh,
Oh my
gee, which
god.
episode was it? Oh, excuse me. Oh, geez.
I'm not gonna say. I
That's
am not
funny.
gonna say. It would be too shameful.
That
But
that that fits
I've
though.
cried over a whole bunch of things the last several, well, because it's that time. But I'm a hair trigger crier. I cry over, like, I used to watch Gladiator because, like, I didn't have cable, I didn't have a computer, I had a VCR, and I had the movie Gladiator, and I used to watch it when I was ovulating because I loved the sword fights when I was ovulating. And when I was PMSing, I used to watch it so that I could bawl my fucking eyes out so bad that 3 days later, I'm explaining to the woman at the grocery store, oh, I'm having an allergy attack. That's why my eyes are puffy.
Oh,
Yeah, see, not me. It's reading stuff that would get to me. But my dumbest tears are something will happen, and I'll be sucking it up and driving on. I'll be doing all right. I've got it under control, and I'm moving past it. And somebody can see that I'm struggling with moving past it, and they'll be like, "Are you okay?" And I lose my shit.
Oh,
Oh,
Like,
yeah,
that's
I'm
the
no.
that is
fine.
the
I'm
worst.
fine
That
until you
no,
ask.
That's
that
a
yeah, or hugged you.
Oh
Oh
my
God,
god, no.
this is what happened when I was at ICMI, right? Because I was walking to the venue the day after I gave my speech. I was hoping to meet Mark Latham. He was apparently hanging around, hoping I would get there in time so he could shake my hand and meet me. But so I'm walking there and I'm at the last fucking traffic light and the phone rings and it's my son telling me that Georgia died. He was actually not that Georgia died, that he thinks Georgia is dead. Mom, I think Georgia died. And so of course I'm walking to the venue. I walk into the venue. I told him, okay, call your grandparents. He says, I already called them. I said, you need to help get Georgia's body somewhere out of the front hallway and figure out, I'll talk to grandma and grandpa and figure out how to deal with all of this, but you just need to get her out of the front hallway, and into some kind of plastic bag or something so that the poo that comes out of her, because poo comes out of dead things, doesn't get everywhere, and all of this, right? And I'm trying to deal with that, and I get to the event and everybody sees that I've been crying and they're all, oh, what's wrong? What's wrong? And then my dog died, and then they're like, oh, and they all want to hug me, and it's like, get the fuck away. just fucking get away from me. Right? And the only one who actually could intuit enough what I was saying was Allison, who then said, I'm transmitting hate through this hug. Because everybody knows that we hate each other.
Of course.
And so this is a hate hug. Here it is. I'm only doing it to annoy you.
One of my best friends had something just
Yeah.
like that. Her mom passed away. She had had cancer. She had breast cancer, and she passed away. And another of our friends tuned into it. We went to the funeral, and she was in essentially a receiving line as people were coming in, and she was having a rough time keeping it together while she, said hello to everybody, and then people went on to her seats and everything. So my our goofy friend leans into her, gives her a hug, and says, "Would it make you feel better if I let you grab my boob?" Just and it wasn't,
There,
it wasn't deliberate insensitivity for the sake of insensitivity. It was to jar you out of that mentality that has you on the verge of tears where you're gonna lose your
it just
shit. And
distracts you.
yeah, and
It
that
distracts
was all
you.
it took.
It helps you. Yeah.
She had a moment
Yeah.
where she like had that one syllable guffaw. You're like, what? And then smiled, just this little smile, and she was okay. She was able to get through, the procedure of the whole process of funeral for the rest of the day after that. And it's little things like that. I know that guys have very similar things that they do. Because I've seen them, jostle each other and razz each other and stuff like that under and graveyard humor under circumstances where they're trying to hold it together. But it seems like there's also a programming there that's slightly different, that they're taught from a younger age to deal with that struggle. um, and it's kind of interesting. And if she
Well,
had lost her shit, if my friend had lost her shit at the funeral of her mother, nobody would have judged her for it because
no,
it was,
no, nobody would.
but if she'd have been a guy, people would have, which is
Oh no,
unfair.
you would
There
have
are,
been weak. You would have
yeah,
been very weak. And
yeah,
that's the very sad part is that, I think that this actually, it's interesting to talk about because I've experienced that as well. Is that when someone comes and hugs you when you're experiencing emotional distress, how that exacerbates it. Does that not sort of go back to why women produce this oxytocin response in particular when introduced to physical skin to skin contact? There's probably something about that it's why like we go and hug women and that's okay, and we massage them and we say it's okay, you're going to be all right. But when a man does it, that's wrong and negative, and you're a pussy and a bitch.
yeah,
Well,
and
but
it,
even it's not just cultural though. I mean, it's not just socialization
Oh
because
no.
once boys hit puberty, their tear ducts and tear glands completely change, right? Women retain the childhood apparatus, right, of large productive tear glands, narrow tear ducts, and lots of hormones in their emotional tears. Men, their tear ducts widen, their tear glands less productive. Look at a microscope, and their tears have different chemical compositions, right? And so they're essentially biologically, physiologically designed to not be criers. And so when they actually do cry, I mean, they need to actually have much more emotional stimulus in order to even weep tears than women do. So we're looking at something that's not just it's not just a matter of training boys. Boys don't cry, boys don't cry, because as boys and as girls, they have the same freaking apparatus for crying, and you will find actually that and testosterone plays a huge role too. You'll find that when women transition to men, to trans men, they'll say, I just can't cry. I just can't do it. I even try, because I've always felt like I could, because I grew up as a girl and all of this, right? And nobody ever told me that I couldn't cry. I was never socialized to not cry, and now I'm really sad, but I can't actually make any tears. And women, trans women, often say, Theron Meyer was a huge one, that, she was very, very open about the fact that the moment she started taking hormone therapy, all of a sudden she's crying over like really trivial things, and things that it would never have occurred to her to cry over before, or even necessarily be upset by. And she's just more emotionally unstable. She's more highly emotional, and she's more likely to cry over any given thing since she started hormone treatments. So I mean, it's not just a socialization thing.
All right, I've got a couple of
No,
super chats
absolutely.
that I'm
That
going
was.
to read
Oh,
off
yeah.
really quick, and then we'll go on to the next statement. And the last super chat will take us right back to it. And I'm going to start, and I'm going to start with Xeranx here, who gave us $5 and referred to Karen's tears. He says, "I'm also affected when shows I like turn to shit, Karen." Joey Jojo gave us $2 and says, "I want a hug. I want to hug Karen." And Hoki Bukisa gave us $5 and said, "Sexual selection culled out the sensitive men. Women selected for testosterone." And that's the super chats. And we'll take one more comment on the issue of tears and testosterone and all of that. And then I'm going to go on to more of the article.
Oh, my only point is that that's exactly what I was saying. Is that this is genetic? It's not social. It's not social. In that, that's exactly why women are more prone to crying, because we're trying to get, well, not trying. We're genetically designed to get more sympathy from the tribe, right? Through our tears and our crying. And that's all that I was going to say. Is that that's exactly the entire point why women are more likely to do it, is to solidify the tribe in terms of the solidarity around femaleness in some ways.
So
Well, and
essentially,
I
like
do want
that thing guys say about women crying to get what they want, whether women intend for it to be true or not, it is.
Yeah, no, and I would also add that, tears work for women. The fact that men evolved to not produce tears, or to produce tears to a much lesser degree, and to not have those manipulative chemicals in their tears, means that crying just doesn't work for men. It does not get them sympathy from the tribe. Maybe when a football player retires or something like that, or when it's really called for, after a crisis is over, and it's really, really called for, um men are okay to cry, and people will sympathize with them if they think that the loss or the grief or the upset is important enough. They will get some sympathy. But to cry over the things that a woman cries about. I was watching some stupid feminist woman saying, oh, I cry at work almost on a daily basis, and she was defending the idea of women crying at work, and how it's not really a disruption, and it's not really a problem. And it's like, uh, really, really crying at work almost every day. Um, Not a problem, not a disruption, not a distraction for
It's
anybody. Give me a
absolutely a
fucking break.
disruption and a huge
Yeah.
problem. I've run into
Yeah.
that. That is very annoying, and it's a sign that there's something wrong with somebody. It never should be left alone and left unaddressed. Um, and I want to point out what we've basically covered here is that, uh, to a degree, everybody cries when there is a strong emotion that needs to be released. Women do it more than men do. Um, Women cry when there's something to gain, and men are far less likely to do that simply because it doesn't work when they do. So, and it is chemical, not just psychological, not just manipulative. Although it is still a manipulation. So yeah, that tells you something about the evolution of the relationship between women and men. And that's going to kind of take us back to the article. Um, Going on, another giveaway in the article regarding that evolution is the confusion. Feminism's sexual revolution combined with the attempt to maintain the economic and traditional sexual traditionalism, I guess you could say, what that has inflicted on young women. This next part is a big clue to that. When I asked Kristen, a 29-year-old from Austin, whether men should make sacrifices to get sex, she offered a confusing prescription. Yes, sometimes, not always. I mean, I don't think it should be should necessarily be given out by women, but I do think it's okay if a woman does just give it out, just not all the time. Kristen rightly wants the man whom she dates to treat her well and to respect her interests, but the choices that she and other women have made unwittingly teach the men in their lives that such behavior is noble and nice, but not required in order to sleep with them. They are hoping to find good men without supporting the sexual norms that would actually make men better. My own personal translation of this: sexual freedom for men is bad for women, and shame on men for pursuing it, and women for tolerating it. That's what I'm seeing in this. Whereas
Well,
women's sexual freedom, women have fought for their sexual freedom. Particularly feminists have fought for women's sexual freedom. Here we are condemning sexual freedom in men, and I think that somewhere in between there is a right place, not necessarily in condemnation, but the idea that sexual freedom should have um, no mitigation whatsoever, that there should be nothing that affects it. That's bullshit, whether you're male or female. But at the other end of it, to have one sex have sexual freedom and the other not is just as bad.
Yeah, they
Well,
kind of
I
want to have
think
their cake and eat it too.
well, I think Rignaris is saying essentially if women stopped doing this, if women repressed their own sexuality, or played the long game rather than the short game, right? Maybe they'd get more of what they want, which is commitment. And men would be forced to play that game. I mean, like, I think Mark Rignaris understands that women, like Gad Sad does, that women control the entire dance. Women lead the dance. And they top from the bottom often. And so you don't necessarily see it, but that's what they're doing. And so if women changed the rules, men went along with it, right? It's not men's fault that they can get sex, that the men who can get sex for next to nothing, um, or nothing at all. And it really does, say something about, him saying, this woman's incoherent answer, oh, well, I don't think women should be, frowned upon for giving it away, but, I just don't want them to do it all the time, right? Because, she wants to keep the market price of sex high enough that she can get something out of it, but she doesn't want to, she doesn't want to rain on any other woman's parade, but she, would really like them to maybe like, ease up a bit so that, she might actually have a chance of getting a commitment out of some guy. And, like the whole thing, I think that he's actually in a roundabout way or in a very covert way, kind of in the way female sexuality works, and female sexual dominance works. He's addressing the fact that this is women who are dictating all of this. It's in women's hands, right? And women could overnight change men's behavior. Warren Farrell said it. I've said it. Everybody in the men's movement has said it. If women changed overnight, changed their demands of men, decided all of a sudden all we want is house husbands and we'll stay married to you forever if you just be a house husband. Oh, all of a sudden what we want is men who walk on their hands, right? How many fucking walk on your hands classes would be full to fucking capacity, right? By men wanting to walk on their hands to get sex with women. Women control the whole fucking thing. He knows it. And maybe he's just saying this, putting responsibility on the women, in a very subtle way, because in order to actually say, women are to blame for this entire fucking mess, right, is just a little too radical for regular people to absorb.
Well, there is that. I
Well,
think it would come
not
across
incorrect,
as
but yeah.
exactly slut shaming.
Yeah, is it slut shaming though? I don't know. I think that the idea of understanding that women control the sexual market, is it like it's too red pilled for people? I think it's because it's contrary and counter to the popular narrative that women are oppressed. Obviously, to understand that actually it's quite the opposite, and that yeah, exactly. If we all decided collectively that we wanted something different out of men, that would happen. I I think though that as a process or a product of the modern feminist movement, people don't even have any capacity to even understand the reality of that. That we really are the ones running the show, at least evolutionarily.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, they don't. Go ahead, Prim.
Well, I was just going to say that also how long now have feminists spent fighting for women to have these sexual freedoms? Go girl. If you want to sleep with 30 men in one night, go for it, and nobody should have the right to say otherwise. So now that we might be acknowledging that, hmm, maybe women do have some social power here in their sexual choices, and this is causing some changes that maybe not everybody sees as positive. All of a sudden everybody's really hesitant to start saying that, hey, maybe these guys do have some power, and that it's not always good to just be doing whatever you want. This is going to come with some consequences, like it or not.
Well, look at how MGTOW are frowned on. I mean, they're essentially seen as the most fringe of all the fringe movements in the men's movement. They're even more frowned upon, believe it or not, than red pillars. From everything that I have read from feminists and mainstreamers, right? The red pillars and the pickup artists, they're like this. Sorry, I'm pouring something, but they're the scum of the earth. But underneath that scum, that's where MGTOW dwell. And MGTOW, what are they doing? They're saying, yeah, I just want to leave women alone. I just don't want anything to do with them. They, live and let live. They go there, they do them, I'll do me. And it's that because that is at least red pillars and pickup artists are trying to do something to please women, to feed women's desires, to pander to women, to make women happy, even if it's only for 15 minutes. They're trying to do something for
It's
women,
because they're opting
right?
out. It's because they're opting out of the system that
But make
puts women in
well,
total
it's
control.
yeah, it MGTOW are like, women, take them or leave them. I don't care. Like, uh, they're just fellow human beings that I don't care to know, and that is the fringiest of the fringe, the extremist of the extreme of the men's movement in the eyes of society, is the men who have ultimately rejected giving women any benefit whatsoever, not even a fucking roll in the hay, right? And not even an orgasm. They won't even give women that, and that is the biggest betrayal.
Yeah, it's actually to the point where feminists will bring up things almost strictly from they start with pickup artists and then they go to MGTOW. They'll go to MGTOW forums and they'll find statements that are really statements about not living in service to women, but they'll treat them as misogynistic statements. It's not misogynistic to say that you're not going to live in service to women. It's not misogynistic to say that you don't want anything to do with women as a man. It's not misogynistic to be gay, so it's not misogynistic to be a bachelor. And it's not
But how?
misogynistic to choose not to have a relationship. It's not misogynistic to point out that the court gives women an advantage, and if you can't tell which women are personally within themselves going to be accountable for their behavior, even though the court doesn't hold them accountable, then you can't trust women. As a group, you can't trust women. It's not misogynistic for men to say that, but feminists will treat all of those statements as if they are misogynistic. And it's because there is this sense of entitlement among women that it's an ingrained thing. You're not even. It's not like you're raised, differently than you're born to think. That differently than you're born to think. It's an ingrained thing that there is this sort of sense of entitlement to be catered to. Have, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? God fucking damn it.
I mean,
Can you hear
Skype
me?
interviews only fucked me over once,
Can you hear me
and
now?
that was with James Damore. And I put in my ear, and
Can
from
you hear
that
me
point
now?
on, and I had just uploaded the raw file to YouTube.
Okay.
And but then I went and I imported the raw file into my iMovie, and everything, all the audio was still there.
The situation
So-
is, you can
Interestingly,
hear
the
me,
chat says
they can't hear
Hannah.
me. They can hear.
Yeah,
They can.
basically whatever Hannah is doing, like she's the main link to the thread. So if everybody
Right.
everybody can hear her, but if she can't hear us, then nobody else can.
Yeah, the situation right now is everybody can hear me
Well,
and everybody can hear everything I can
can't
hear.
her.
She just said
And
Well, they
everyone
said
shut
they
up.
hear everyone.
yeah, and I have said in the chat,
What?
everyone shut up. So we'll just wait for everyone to see
I can hear
what I have
else.
said in the chat. Let's see how long it takes the badgers
Yeah.
to do what it
Okay,
says in the chat.
But we've
But
lost our
the-
host.
Yeah.
Our host and our cat herder.
Seriously. Like, actually, I'm going to type it in all caps in the chat now. Okay, and I will figure
Oh my
out
goodness.
what
Hannah,
the
come
fuck
back.
is going on. They can't hear me.
We
But
love you,
I
Hannah.
lost my
Come back.
internet. I just want to say we were with Time Warner Cable. Time Warner Cable has apparently been taken over by another organization, Spectrum, I believe. And Spectrum has done this repeatedly. My internet goes off for a couple of minutes at a time and then comes back on. And I don't know why. So that's what we're dealing with right now. And I might actually have to stop and restart the stream because I actually cannot hear, or I can hear them, they can hear or not hear me, and you can hear both of us. So bear with me for a moment and my technical difficulties, and if this is the way it's going to be, well, fuck Spectrum. So I've restarted the stupid stream. And now, can the other badgers hear me? Apparently not. Bear with me again momentarily. This is incredibly annoying. Now, can the other badgers hear me? Can you?
Yes.
Yay!
Yes.
Solved it! Woohoo! I knew I could
That
get it
was
figured
weird.
out. Well, no, what basically happened, and I explained this to the show, is that I was with Time Warner with my internet, and Spectrum took them over, and ever since Spectrum took them over, we've been having like approximately 1 to 2 minute breaks in our internet service at random intervals where we just don't have
Oh,
any internet
jeez.
connection. I don't know what's going on, whether they've had some sort of bug in their system or whether they've had something go wrong or what, but I lose my internet periodically. And so far, it hadn't happened during a regular stream, so far I haven't badmouthed Spectrum for this, but now I have. And as far as I'm concerned, they deserve it until they fix this. But in any case, now that we are back, I will go on with the story. Um, but yeah, apparently when it shut that down, all of my shit went haywire and decided that my headphones didn't exist anymore. I don't know what the connection there is, but you know, that's the way it goes. Moving on
Oh,
with
it's
the
it's the patriarchy. Blame them.
yeah. It's uh so after failing entirely to acknowledge that the attitude that was described previously for women is a bit mercenary, the article goes on. He says, for many men, transition away from a mercenary attitude toward relationships can be difficult. The psychologist and relationship specialist Scott Stanley of the University of Denver sees visible daily sacrifices, such as accepting inconveniences in order to see a woman, as the way that men typically show their developing commitment. In other words, when women shit test you, they're checking to see if you love them. Um, and then he goes on, it signals the expectation of a future together. Such small instances of self sacrificing love may sound simple, but they are less likely to develop when past and present relationships are founded on the expectations of cheap sex. And my thought on this is so close and still a miss, as the professor fails to realize that if a mercenary attitude toward relationships is damaging when men do it, it's also damaging when women do it. And that if sacrifices are a way of showing commitment, then condemnation of the expectation that women do the same is condemnation of expecting women to commit equally to a relationship. So, which is it? Has freeing women from those expectations been a mistake? And my opinion is it has. Or if not, why on earth should we continue to expect men to be subject to them?
Well, one of the things that I also noticed in one of the other articles that you posted was that somebody was saying, "Oh, men who don't marry, they grow up to become problems to society. They don't settle down and become happy with a partner and have children or whatever. They go on and they become delinquents and deplorables, and they don't do anything for society, and they don't settle down the way men are supposed to do." And it's an awfully um, uncharitable view of men to assume that just because some men don't want to get married, that they're automatically going to become problematic to society.
Well, I will say that there is some truth to that in the sense that when my mom and dad met, my dad was kind of a bit of a fuck up. He was doing the bare minimum of in terms of work, and he often ran out of money before the end of you know, the money ran out before the month did, and when he was on his last dollar, he would go and he would buy an onion and a pound of lard and a loaf of bread, and he would fry the onion up on the hot plate in because they didn't have a stove or an oven on the hot plate in the one bedroom apartment that he shared with five other guys, right? And he would cook the onion up in the lard, a whole pound of lard, and he would spread it on the bread after it hardened again, and that's what he would eat for the 3 or 4 days before his next paycheck arrived, right? And this is how he was living, right? Then he met my mom, and then he had something to actually, he had a reason to do better than that, right?
Yeah, well,
And
and I have heard of that sort of thing. Like it is a motivator to improve,
when
but
when women have children, they scale down their participation in the workforce. When men have children, they scale up their participation in the workforce. That is just the way it has always been. That is how things work. And so if you are relying on male productivity to make your society function, and men are not marrying and are not having children, then you are essentially relying on people who have no reason to be more productive than the bare minimum. And I think that this is one of these, it's sort of a level or 3 or 4 up from the level of the individual. Why should men be expected to do this? Why should men be expected to commit if they don't have to? Right? Especially when the terms of the deal are so sour, right? But when you go a few levels up and you actually look down on the situation, and you see that, you know, we are prioritizing women's education, we are prioritizing women in the workplace. These are women who will, regardless of whether they're married or not, still want to take breaks in their careers when they have children. They will still want to, and they will demand their employers pay for that, and the government, right? They will still want to only return part-time if possible. And therefore, right? Therefore, a female doctor just isn't going to give you as much doctoring as a male doctor over the course of her career, and all of these things, right? When you look at all of these issues, it's incredibly understandable that people in charge of policy, people who are looking at things from a sociological angle and not an individualistic angle, are freaking the fuck out about the fact that men are bugging out, right? They're bugging out of the situation that makes them the most productive, right?
Well, in
And
this,
the government is not willing to cut off the gravy train for women. It's not willing to say men aren't willing to marry you bitches and raise your kids. We're not paying for that either. No, the government is going to pay for that until the day everything comes tumbling down, until the day the entire fucking thing crashes. They will be paying for women to have kids without men. They will be doing it, right? And so what you have is a situation where everybody is desperate. Everybody who sees anything of what's going on from that upper level, looking down at the petri dish, everybody who sees that is saying, we need to get men engaged again. How do we do it? But they don't want to say, here's how we do it. We limit women's sexuality. We get rid of the pill, right? We get rid of no fault divorce. We get rid of abortion, right? We get rid of all of these things, all of these free, we get rid of affirmative action for women. We get rid of women only scholarships. We're rid of women only programs, promoting them in the workforce, in STEM, in different fields of education. We get rid of all of that, right? Maybe we prioritize men in those things, because it's men who are going to be working 35 fucking years nonstop once they get their medical degree, and they're not going to be working 35 hours a week. They're going to be working 60. And that's a whole lot of doctoring that you're getting for your investment
That's
compared to
something
a
that,
woman.
yeah, that's something that the people who promote the wage gap myth never take into consideration. One of the things that gets promoted along with the wage gap myth is this idea that historically, when it comes to education, women have been discriminated against. Um, and I can't consider it to be discrimination for a society and the components of that society to react to the way people actually behave by tailoring their structures to accommodate and make the best use of those behaviors. And since it was much more common for women to to graduate with a degree that they weren't going to use, or to work less in that area, to even go so far as to just use a degree as a feather in their cap, and never work in that area.
Part
But
of their
definitely,
trousseau.
yeah, yeah. But
It was part of their
basically,
trousseau.
yeah. And so here you'd have a situation where a university has a limited number of seats for the medical field, or a limited number of seats in the field of law, and they need, as the university, they got to produce, in order for people to want to come back to that university. They got to show that people come out of that university and they find work in a community, and they have careers, and they develop prestige and all of the things that you want when you decide, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be a lawyer, I'm going to be a scientist. You're looking at, I want to achieve things. I want to do things for people. I want to have an effect on the world. I want to have a career. I want to make money. I want to be able to support my family. Those are all things the university needed to demonstrate to men that were coming in. This is what you're going to get for your dollar when you pay to go to school here. And if they have a certain percentage of their students coming out of there and doing nothing, that's not a very good demonstration for future students. It's not something that they can sell to past students as, hey, you should donate to our school, invest in the future of our institution's educational services, because there's going to be a lot of people that are going to come to school here and then brag about it a lot and do nothing else. Nobody's going to want to give them money for that. So of
Well,
course they're going to
what
reserve more seats for the people that are going to go out and work in the field, but they still allowed women in university seats as well. And along comes Title IX in the 70s, as women had started becoming more prominent and prevalent in the workforce at the upper echelons where they didn't have to be. Universities weren't catching up with that. The state came along and said, no, you have to catch up. And that was all Title IX really was supposed to achieve. It achieved it almost immediately and was outdated almost before the ink dried. And
Yeah.
here we have this situation where we've got all of these programs to get women into education. And the thing is, yes, there was an increase. Yes, there was an increase in women wanting to go out into the workforce. Yes, there was an increase in women wanting careers. No, they're not doing it the same way men do. And that's, if we're not going to push paying them the same regardless, that's okay. And as
But
long
why
as
do we
we're
have to
not
act like
pushing
this is
for all of
wrong?
these programs, that's okay. If women and men are different, that's okay. If women and men work differently, that's okay. As long as we don't act like we have to reward women for what men are doing if women aren't doing what men are doing. And
Well,
that's
what
where the problem lies right now. We're in a situation where society is demanding that women get rewarded for what men do without doing what men do.
the the problem is that even what you're saying is based on a false premises. The false premise is that women were, systemically denied
No, no,
education.
no. They weren't
No, no,
systemically
no.
denied education.
No, but no, they weren't really discriminated
There,
against either.
there were there
In
there
the
weren't
19
as many
in
women interested in going.
That's right, and there weren't as many because education did not used to be subsidized by the government the way it is now. So parents who wanted to send their kids to fucking grade school had to pay. Parents who wanted to send their kids to middle school had to pay, right? For those kids. And if you have a son and a daughter and you know your daughter is entitled to the support of her husband and you know your son is going to be obligated to support a wife, you're going to send your son to school if you only can afford to send one, right? That's what you're going to do. In the 1920s, 6% of American women and 7% of American men had post secondary education. That is parity. Where the disparity happened was with the GI Bill. And the GI Bill only disproportionately benefited men because only men were fucking draftable, right? And those men were given grants and bursaries and all kinds of shit and loans, low interest loans, to either buy a house, start a business, or get an education. And a lot of them took advantage of it and they got an education. And if women had been draftable during fucking World War II and during Vietnam, maybe there would not have been that disparity coming out of the 1970s. But up until the GI Bill, it was almost equal numbers of men and women getting a post-secondary education. Because you know why? Because the only people who sent their kids to fucking school were already rich, and they were rich enough to send all of their kids to school.
Now, the one
This is
thing I will
fascinating.
say, though, in
Read
the United
Charles
States,
Murray on this.
one thing I will say is in the
Oh,
United States,
go ahead,
there was a
Hannah.
definite difference in what women went to school for versus what men went to school for. And there was this perception that quotas in certain areas in universities were the reason and not the result. Universities struggled to get men into those areas where, like I said, doctors, lawyers, scientists, those areas where they were going to go out and be ambassadors for the college to the world. And that was something that was a real thing. That was something that was needed. Um, but yeah, no, they weren't discriminating against women. There were two issues there. Women went into different things than men went into because their lifestyles were going to be different and their interests were different. And again, the universities did need more people to go out in those areas, such as medicine and science and other prestigious or high importance jobs, and be ambassadors for the university. But there was equity as far as in terms of how many people attended university. On the other hand, there were also, and this is something that I heard from my own family, women who went to school to get their so-called MRS degree. It's where you meet your
Oh
husband.
yeah. Oh
Um,
yeah. No, my
Oh,
guy.
now,
yes. It's
My guy was
active
sitting.
today.
yeah, it's still active today.
My guy was.
Now,
My guy
guys,
was sitting listening
I'm gonna
to
have to
three
be
to three. Just give me one second.
one
Three
second, and then
classmates.
I'm gonna have to
Three
be
female
a cunt.
three female classmates sitting in the cafeteria talking, right? Engineering students. One of them says to the other that she's not going to get a job in engineering because she doesn't have to, because she's engaged to a man who earns enough to support her. The other one says she's not going to because the hours are something that she doesn't want to deal with. So she's probably going to work as a yoga instructor at Starbucks once she finishes her degree, right? And the third one is, yeah, well, I'm feeling it out. I'm looking for a guy, and I probably won't actually get a job in engineering,
And there
right?
you
And
have,
these are women who are guaranteed jobs 6 months before they graduate because
yeah.
engineering is so desperate for women.
And there you have the one of the causes of the discrepancy in interest in marriage right there. Women are looking for somebody to support them financially, and they used to be willing to trade being a supporting partner, intellectually, psychologically, emotionally, and physically for their husband. And that has changed dramatically. And men aren't getting anything for being that financially supporting partner, much less being all of those other things as well. So it's not a big surprise that men aren't marrying. But since I do have to work tonight and we do have to have time for the after show, I'm going to be a horrible cunt and make this a cliffhanger. 2 weeks from now, on the next Pussycat cast, we will have part two. And we can continue this discussion. I would like to invite all of my co-hosts to return for that show, and thank you very much for being on this show, and apologize for being a cunt, but there's a lot more to discuss than I really thought we would be discussing. So we've really found quite a bit to talk about here. In the meantime, I'm going to read the last of the super chats from tonight, and then I also have a shill, but it's not for us. So a while back, actually, before my internet took a crap, Joseph Bellavance gave us $5 and said, "Love the cerebral discussions. Keep bringing on Teal Deer and Aiden." Joey Jojo gave us $2 and said, "Sexual selection is BS, but it is a woman's choice." And then later we had Hokibukisa, if I can say it right, says no fucking chance. It'll all have to crash and burn, and that's the black pill. And I know we have a lot of black pillars listening that expect society to crash and burn. I hope you're wrong. I can see where you're coming from, and I understand where that's coming from. But I hope you're wrong. And I'm not going to hold my breath. It's the same thing as with feminists changing their minds. I'm not holding my breath, but I am still going to hold out hope for society. And with that, I'm going to go on to the shill. Um, an organization called March for Men is doing a conference in London on International Men's Day. There will be speakers. They're basically, they had a March for Men conference last year. They're bringing a march and a mini conference to the capital of the UK, London, for International Men's Day 2017, which is Sunday, November 19th, or for those of you in the UK, Sunday 19th November, because y'all are backwards. Their speakers, they're going to have Mike Buchanan, Neil Lydon, Steve Moxon, Jordan Gonzo, William Stiles, Will Franken, our own Dr. Random McCam, and Belinda Brown, Adam Bulford, and Mark Pearson, and Richard Elliott. So they're going to have quite a bit going on there. There's a website to check out for this. That is marchformen.wordpress.com. There's also the event tickets are on sale, I believe, at Eventbrite. It's eventbrite.co.uk/e/messages for men tickets. I'm going to put the link in the low bar because it's a complicated one. But I wanted to make sure everyone was aware that this is taking place, and go check it out if you're in the UK and get the opportunity. Go check it out. Go see the speakers. The tickets are only 11. I think that's pounds, because it doesn't look the same as the euro symbol, and I'm not so good at looking at money symbols that are not American. But so it's either 11 pounds or 11 euros, but it looks like 11 pounds to me. And with that, I'm going to take us on out. Once again, thanks for listening, and thanks to all of my co-hosts. And I look forward to discussing this more in 2 weeks.